Second question is going to be more technical. So my name's Tim Porter, and I am the CTO of Underminer Studios, and we do volumetric video, VR, AR, everything all the way across the board. So what we call it is visualization technology. So everything that involves visual, and then as long as you can go ahead and automate it or make something cool out of it, that's what we do. So we've been doing that for about 3 years. I spent 10 years in the game industry, and then on top of that I spent another year in the movie industry. I was a pipeline technical director in movies, and in games I was a technical artist for most of my career. And so I've done a whole bunch of work in the interdepartment liaison work, a lot more work in automation, and then optimization was always my big sweet spot. So I end up going ahead and looking at some of the issues that were happening in the movie industry, and that is the uncanny valley. Who knows what the uncanny valley is? We got 1, we got 2, we got 15. Everybody should know. If you don't know what the uncanny valley is, it basically is this huge chart that we have that goes along and goes, this thing gets more and more realistic, it gets more and more realistic, and then suddenly there's a massive drop. And the massive drop actually happens because once a human looks at another human, we have this certain section in our brain or receptor that goes, this is people, or it's not people. And then once we have that little trick and trigger, then when facial mocap gets involved, there are certain issues that happen. You have micro expressions and macro expressions, you have blood flow changes, and then little twitches that people and humans actually do. So I end up building a piece of technology like this, where we actually sit down people in front of a giant array of cameras. Who knows what photogrammetry is? Got a couple more people. So photogrammetry is the concept of using a whole bunch of cameras. If I take a whole bunch of photos of you in a bunch of different directions, I can turn you into a three-dimensional asset. If I take a whole bunch of cameras, and then instead of doing photos, I do videos, then I can convert you into things like this. So what's cool is, he's not a two-dimensional asset, he's fully 3D. We're able to move him around, we're able to deal with him. We actually have a playback system that works in Unity. You can actually see it in VR in the back room like we were talking about. And then we can also do it in mobile. Obviously this is on Sketchfab, and it works really well in Maya, C4D, absolutely anything out there. It plays back very well. And so obviously this is something that will be coming towards you. We do build our own rigs as well. There are a whole bunch of different companies that are out there that are actually trying to go into this space or are actually in this space. People that you may know like Microsoft and Intel and ADI. ADI is like the smallest company that's out there that's got like $60 million, you know, they're just a little nugget of a company, right? And so we've gone the entirely opposite direction. So we're trying to bring this to something that regular creators can utilize. So we have rigs that are starting at $1,000 when a normal rig starts at $500,000, or if you're talking about a Microsoft studio, the license alone is $1.5 million. So we're on the opposite side to be able to help people and be able to make this something that everyone can go ahead and utilize. So if anybody's ever played with photogrammetry, a really interesting thing or a really bizarre thing that ends up happening is when you get these assets out, the computer goes through and it matches up all of these different images. And then it ends up making this three-dimensional mesh out of it, just like you see right here. But the really bizarre thing that happens is the way that the mesh is generated is based off of how a computer understands people and understands three-dimensional. And so you get these parts that move up and down and like all of these different places that are really different. And then if you end up doing it as videos over time, they're entirely different over time. So you can't do things like simulations on top of it. So if you want to go ahead and like splat this face with like cloth dynamics, or if you want to go ahead and, you know, hit it with mud or something like that, you normally can't do that. So I end up creating another style of technology that I call temporal preservation. And so we don't say the word temporal enough, I think, in our industry. We need to talk about time more. And so that in as well, I really want to see a whole bunch of soups running around. Did you get that TP done? Did you get that done? So, thanks. And so, you know, coming from movie industry, I really want to see some of these guys do that. But what we do is we actually save the mesh data over time, and this ends up having a couple of different things that are really awesome with it. Number one is, since this mesh data is saved over time, we can go ahead and do other things like we were talking about, doing dynamic simulations and things like that, and slap on different parts and pieces that are going on. But the biggest thing is We can save texture data over time. So I'm only using a single texture to actually run that entire experience. So normally when you do photogrammetry, playback, or photogrammetry in general, the reason why it's so expensive, which a sequence like this would end up being about 33 megs, this is at 1.7 megs. And so it is able to play back in video games and movies. What we're using it for is actually for corporations right now. We have 2 different clients. One of them is a wheelchair manufacturer, and we're actually training people on how to drive their wheelchairs. And you have to think if somebody's being trained on how to drive an electric wheelchair, they've probably gone through a traumatic experience. Either they've become physically degraded or mentally degraded enough that they can no longer drive their wheelchair, or on the flip side, they've been into a traumatic accident of some sort. So what I did was I created a system that actually hijacks all their drive controls. If you have a joystick, instead of the joystick driving the wheelchair, it actually drives your VR experience instead. And then we're having people in there help calm them down and be able to talk to them and teach them how to drive their wheelchair as they're going along. Because you have an X amount of time to actually become proficient in driving your wheelchair. If at the end of that time you're not considered proficient, your insurance company will deny you getting an electrical wheelchair, and then so you're thinking about like literally the most underserved group of individuals in the entire world have now been taken away their dignity. And so I created a system to hijack all of that data. They're able to go ahead and drive a VR experience, and then we put in things like this to have people be able to talk to them. And then the other one is actually for a Big 4 accounting firm, and that will be able to tell and teach people how to deal with massive data sets all at the same time. So we're dealing with website data of a very large and very highly aggregated amount of data, and we're sharing that data between multiple people at the same time, so everybody can interact with the data at the same time. And then there's an AI assistant that is basically HAL, but I've tuned back the anger just a little bit. If nobody knows HAL? 2001: Space Odyssey? It was Daisy? No, okay. All right. Yeah, that was a bad joke, fall flat. But the entire thing behind it is how do we get real people, how do we digitize the human world? And this is the starts of that technology, and obviously, it's continuing to move over time. Like I said, I am in the back, and you can totally come and see us in VR. You can take a look at what we have, and I'm going to be doing some shooting on Tuesday. If anyone's interested, we'll definitely be doing some recording. So, cool. Thanks.